Welcome to the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod, everybody. I'm Brian Morgenstern here with Sam Lyman. Very good developments in Bitcoin world as the Trump administration gets staffed up. We will talk about declassifying documents. We will talk about assembling the Bitcoin Dream Team. Lots of really cool stuff today. Sam, where should we get started?
Yeah, let's start with the Bitcoin Dream Team. So a huge announcement in the last few days that Donald Trump has selected an AI and crypto czar, which is newsworthy not only because of the person he selected, but because he built this position. It really shows where the Trump administration's priorities lie over the next 4 years. And that AI and crypto czar is none other than all-in bestie, David Sachs. So for those who don't know, David Sachs is a member of the PayPal mafia, very well-respected person within the tech community in Silicon Valley. And there we have Trump announcing it on Truth Social post. Remember, no announcement is official until it's come from the Truth Social. But he talks about David Sachs saying that he will guide policy for the administration in artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency, two areas critical to the future of American competitiveness. So Trump gets it. He really understands how critical both AI and crypto will be to the future. And I think we could venture to say he understands how critical these issues are a lot better than the current administration. Case in point, who currently is the de facto AI czar under President Biden. It's none other than Kamala Harris. If Kamala Harris was the czar of anything, it would be AI. And so this particular article talks about how Biden selected Kamala Harris to essentially head up AI policy in the current administration, which has been more or less a disaster. To kind of get into this a little bit more, don't take my word for it. Let's listen to what Mark Andreessen has to say about how this current White House has approached AI policy.
They said, look, AI is one of these technology. AI is a technology basically that the government is going to completely control. This is not going to be a startup thing. They actually said flat out to us, don't do AI startups. Like don't fund AI startups. It's not something that we're going to allow to happen. They're not going to be allowed to exist. There's no point. They basically said AI is going to be a game of 2 or 3 big companies working closely with the government, and we're going to basically wrap them in a, I'm paraphrasing, but we're going to basically wrap them in a government cocoon. We're going to protect them from competition. We're going to control them, and we're going to dictate what they do.
Yikes. That's
terrifying.
Terrible. It doesn't get much worse than that. So again, we can't even contrast too sharply just how different David Sachs is from Kamala Harris. Brian, what do you make of this appointment, though? It's big news in the AI and crypto space. What's your take on Trump's here?
Huge. We should also point out that David is a board member of the very platform that we are currently broadcasting from. He is a great free speech advocate and a great advocate for tech and the advancement of the American economy and leadership there. So this is a great signal. The Biden administration spent the last 4 years trying to put Bitcoin businesses out of work. Basically, they tried to regulate away our bank accounts with Operation Choke Point debanking. They tried to come after our energy contracts and eliminate our access to electricity. They attacked self-custody, people who want to custody their own Bitcoin in their own private wallets. It was relentless. And I think David Sachs comes at this from a much more liberty-oriented perspective. He wants private sector companies in America to have a chance to succeed. So this is a great, great appointment. I would note that I believe it's under the special government employee classification, which means he can still run his businesses. This is a temporary position. He doesn't even have to take a paycheck if he doesn't want to. It is something that others have done during the coronavirus pandemic. I recall Dr. Scott Atlas, who was helping to advise President Trump on pandemic-related issues, did not leave his day job at Stanford, really. He was this kind of special government employee, temporary advisor appointment. So Sachs's power will be derived from the president. He will not have independent authority. It'll be an advisory position, but he's got one heck of a bully pulpit. He's got one heck of an ally in Elon Musk, with whom he's worked for decades now. And I think he's built up a really good relationship of trust and rapport with President Trump, Don Jr., others in the Trump orbit. So his kind of advocacy for tech independence, advancement, progress is going to be a really welcome change, particularly considering the contrast that we've just had to deal with for 4 years. So very exciting news. That's my take.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much AI could have taken off in the last couple of years if there hadn't been an administration that essentially had its boot on the neck of the industry. Also makes you wonder how much AI and crypto will both together take off over the next 4 years with someone like David Sachs at the helm directing the policy of this government. Brian, another question along these lines. Let's suppose you were advising David Sachs. Let's say Sachs reached out to you today saying, what should I implement as my policies in this position as czar to better the crypto industry? What would you say to him? What should be the direction that he takes the country over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, first, do no harm, the old Hippocratic oath. So stop the regulatory overreach and abuse. So talk to the banking regulators, the Fed, the OCC, the FDIC, and help ensure that there will be fair access to financial services for these companies. Talk to the energy regulators at the Department of Energy and the EPA. Talk to the incoming White House staff at the National Security Council, Office of Science and Technology Policy, these offices, to make sure that we're going to have the energy that we need for the future to fund new technology, because that is going to be a critical piece of President Trump's potential success, is helping to make sure American energy is dominant, because none of these industries can succeed without it. So first, do no harm. Next, I think it's a matter of finding out how we can have a more thriving investment environment. Maybe he looks at things like the FTC and creating a culture of more, allowing smaller companies that are succeeding to then be acquired with investment funds or larger companies, and so that we can have a more robust startup ecosystem with a path to exits that are going to encourage more entrepreneurs to innovate and to try new things. Those are a few of the issues off the top of my head that he should focus on, particularly with respect to Bitcoin. I think the U.S. would benefit from a Bitcoin strategic reserve. So I think it would strengthen the nation's balance sheet. It would also be good for, of course, the industry, I think, to have that kind of vote of confidence. That would be a good issue. And then getting clear rules of the road through Congress so that digital assets can thrive in America and not have this kind of regulation by enforcement that the SEC has engaged in, having clear delineation of responsibilities between various agencies, whether it's the SEC or CFTC or what have you. I mean, that's already a pretty long list, but that if you're able to make some progress on any or all of those issues, it's going to be, it will really mark a sea change from where we are today. So we're here to cheer him on and help however we can.
Yeah, it makes me optimistic for the future of crypto and artificial intelligence and tech and the economy more broadly. There's a lot to look forward to in the next few years. And it's interesting as well, Brian, because you mentioned that Sachs will be a special government employee. There's also Elon Musk coming on and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are coming on as essentially advisors, not full government employees. And I think it's telling that in the new regime, these people don't really want to serve in government. And in the old regime, you have a cadre of lifelong bureaucrats and politicians between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and others who really had very little private sector experience. In the new administration, by contrast, you have people who don't want to be politicians necessarily. I think that's promising for the future of the country. And I think it's promising as well because you're seeing some pretty big victories from what's been termed the counter elite. So what is the counter elite? The counter elite is the coalition of tech and, I guess, Silicon Valley leaders who are essentially very much aligned with Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Vivek, Chamath Palihapitiya, and others who are looking at our current establishment and are very frustrated with the way America's ruling class has conducted itself over the last 20 years, and the way that that ruling class has more or less sold out the American dream and has done so in favor of mass immigration, in favor of outsourcing jobs overseas, essentially enacting a lot of policies that have hollowed out our middle class and are really hurting even more so the working class. So we've seen in Trump's victory, especially, a massive victory for the counter elite. I think the biggest difference in 2024 is that Trump had the backing of some pretty significant millionaires and billionaires in Silicon Valley and other economic hubs across the country. And so, Brian, my question is, with the David Sachs appointment, I think is just a case in point here. David Sachs is also a member of Peter Thiel's PayPal Mafia. It seems like this counter elite is winning. Am I too bullish in saying that? And what do you think the counter elite's prospects are for the future? Do you think it can ultimately defeat the current establishment, or do you think the current establishment still has some fight left in them?
I think they are ushering in a really important paradigm shift. And I think it's important to note that what the haters and losers, as President Trump calls them, will say about this is that these are just a bunch of business titans advancing their own interests. I view it much differently than that, and I think they do as well. This is sort of a return to citizen government where people will come in to solve the problem being government has been overbearing, it has overregulated, it has not issued clear rules, it has tried to pick winners and losers in the private sector, and it has overspent us into oblivion and printed too much money and caused unsustainable inflation and unsustainable debt. These are civilization killing problems. And I'm very grateful to have some of the smartest, most successful people in the world saying, we want to help fix this, because if America goes, there's no place else to go. We are the last, best hope. And so they want to solve these problems to make sure that the American economy is going to thrive, that we get these problems under control. And it may help. Maybe it will help some of their businesses. I think it's going to help the entire country. So sometimes, the narrative is already bubbling up with the mainstream media that conflicts of interest. It's not a conflict if interests are aligned. If they're just trying to create a more competitive, robust business environment where, their companies may thrive, other companies may thrive. It's not a zero-sum game, but that's how I think the kind of legacy institutions and elite in Washington often look at things, as zero sum, as one person's going to win, another person's going to lose. But business leaders understand that everybody can do better. A rising tide can lift all ships. And so I'm just grateful to see these business leaders who have a lot at stake. I mean, politics is a disgusting game. So I think a lot of these people didn't want to get involved. It wasn't their first choice of things to do. But they saw these kind of existential threats to the country's ability to succeed and for, probably their businesses to succeed as well. And so they saw problems to solve. They're not interested in the title. It's not this traditional way of looking at things in government and politics where you pick a team, a political party, and then you work your way up through the ranks. And each administration, you get another rung up on the ladder. And eventually you're like a cabinet secretary or something. And then you go sit on boards and give speeches and, ride off into the sunset. It's not about the job for these guys the way it is for your typical DC elites. It's about solving the problem. It's about the issues. So it's ironic to me, finally getting around to my point after that ridiculous word salad, but hopefully everybody understands what I'm saying. Finally, my point, the founders of America viewed people in government, elected officials and otherwise, as citizen legislators. For example, you go, you serve a term or a couple terms or what have you, and then you go back to your farm or whatever it was that you were doing back home, and then somebody else comes in and takes a turn. It's viewed as service, not a social climbing mechanism. So I think these guys being willing to take the arrows in this dirty game of politics just for the purpose of solving problems in a temporary capacity and then go back to their business. It's actually ironic that the most successful, forward-leaning tech entrepreneurs, these tech bros, are actually behaving in a sort of a American colonial way, but in the most modern, I don't know, way you can think about it. I hopefully that makes some sense, but I'm just pleased to see successful citizens getting involved to solve problems and then go back to their business, as opposed to the DC elites just climbing for 30 or 40 years at the expense of the American people. That's my point.
Yeah. The founding fathers had that ethos of you're a plowman, then you become a politician, then you return to being a plowman again. And I think George Washington himself modeled that better than anyone. And like you're saying, it's amazing that today the tech elite are modeling the colonial example for the rest of us. And I think Democrats and establishment politicians more generally could really take note here and follow that example. You know, what's great about the current administration that's being built up before our eyes is that David Sachs is just one member of the dream team. We have a lot more people coming on who represent all sectors of the economy, all walks of American life, who really embody the ethos of making America great again. I think one of those people is Scott Bessent, who Trump has selected to be the Secretary of the Treasury. So Scott Bessent has a really compelling life story. He himself has said that he came from a lot of money and his dad managed to lose it all. So he's lived both as a wealthy person growing up and then they became poor. And his determination was to earn that money all back. So he essentially became a self-made man, growing up from that state of not having a lot of money. And he's one of the most successful men on Wall Street today. And he is, important to note, very friendly towards crypto. Let's play that clip, Dylan.
I've been excited about the president's embrace of crypto, and I think it fits very well with the Republican Party, the ethos of crypto's about freedom, and the crypto economy is here to stay. The Democrats are running from it because they're trying to wash off the stench of Sam Bankman-Fried and his family's donations to the Democratic Party.
There we go. And he's not mincing words about why Dems turned on crypto so quickly. Much to like about Scott Bessent, very forward thinking on crypto, but also a well-respected economist when it comes to matters of macroeconomics as well. Brian, what's your take on Scott Bessent? Is this something that should be celebrated in crypto and on Wall Street more broadly?
Well, I think so. And the people I know who know him sing his praises, say he's one of the smartest people they've worked with. They really get along with him well personally. And it seems like he is going to sail through to confirmation. I don't think there's a lot of objections, even from the Democrats, on this choice for Treasury Secretary. It's a position that is often occupied by a successful business leader who is familiar with financial markets and balance sheets. And so somebody who can, who will be successful at managing America's finances. So, and I love his embrace of not just Bitcoin and crypto, but the reasons for it, of individual empowerment and freedom. So understanding the why, I actually find even more compelling and interesting and heartening than just a generalized support. So pretty excited about it. I think like every newbie to Washington, he's in for, it's not always going to be easy. There will be a rocky road. There's always partisanship. And, there will be some struggles there and some attacks, I'm sure, at some point along the way. But so far, he seems to have pretty smooth sailing. So very optimistic about this pick.
I am as well. And then his number 2 at Treasury is Michael Falkender, who, Brian, is someone you know personally. If I remember right, I think you actually spoke with him at an event at the University of Maryland a few months back. Much to like him, Michael Falkender. Tell us more about him and the wisdom behind this choice as number 2 at Treasury.
Yeah, he's a fantastic guy, and he's very intelligent, highly competent, which we desperately need in our government. He's a professor of finance at University of Maryland. He was the Assistant Secretary for Economic Policy, which is the Treasury Department's chief economist. And he and I were office neighbors for more than 3 years, and a good personal friend. Am absolutely elated by this choice. I think he will do an excellent job as the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. He's got a sterling reputation on a bipartisan basis. And so I think he's just an outstanding pick. Highly competent, super likable, and knows the department, obviously. So the DepSec job, as they call it, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, depending on the administration and who the secretary is often tasked with managing the day-to-day operations, sometimes of a large chunk of the department, sometimes specific parts of it. But either way, he has shown a real aptitude for doing that, for managing well, for getting loyalty and high performance from the employees, and he gets it. He wants free market economies. He wants to get our country's finances back on track. He wants to start addressing the national debt. He wants our currency to be strong. He wants Bitcoin and other markets to just have a fair shot which is really all we're asking for. So just an outstanding pick for this position. I think Mike Faulkner will do a wonderful, wonderful job, and he should have a pretty clear path to confirmation. I don't imagine it'll be very controversial.
So Treasury was pretty hostile towards crypto under the current administration. Even more hostile, though, was, of course, the SEC. When we went to Bitcoin Nashville this last year, the biggest round of applause that Trump received was when he announced that on day one, he will fire Gary Gensler. The entire crowd erupted for about 20 seconds of applause, after which Trump said, wow, let me say that again. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler.
Yeah.
Everyone gets off their feet, cheers, and hollers even louder than before. So Gary Gensler, reading the very obvious tea leaves there, announced his resignation, clearing the way for Paul Atkins to be selected as the SEC chair. So if you'd pull up that True Social post, or that tweet, Dylan. So Paul Atkins is someone very well respected within the crypto community. Jake Chervinsky, who's very well-known lawyer within the industry, pointed out that it's impossible to express the magnitude of the shift we're likely to see at an SEC run by Paul Atkins. It's worth noting that Paul Atkins is actually on the board of the Digital Chamber, which is a crypto industry trade association that we work with pretty often. In addition to that, let's get just a small taste of how Paul Atkins feels towards crypto.
If it challenges incumbents and it helps to bring down costs for investors and for people who are trying to raise capital. I mean, that's the reason why we have financial markets.
So there's his philosophy. If it challenges incumbents and it leads to better and more free markets, then it's a good thing, which is probably the best argument there is for crypto. Brian, what do you make of the Paul Atkins selection?
Yeah, I mean, excellent choice. He has the interesting combination of the sterling reputation and experience to do this job. He already was a commissioner on the SEC years ago, but the forward thinking and freedom minded approach that will, I think, make him very successful, because the SEC really is about capital allocation, making sure that things are done fairly and transparently so that investors are protected from manipulation and fraud, but not protected from themselves. And, there was a point in the interview, I think, where he had mentioned sometimes people might make investments that are not successful and they might lose money sometimes. Well, yeah, because in free markets, not everything wins. Not everything is going to be a great investment, but you make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time. And people shouldn't be protected from themselves. They should be protected from lying, from fraud, from manipulation. But you shouldn't be taking this kind of nanny state approach, number one. But you also shouldn't take the approach that the SEC has had the last several years, which is to pick winners and losers and decide, I like this industry, I don't like that industry. You need free markets to thrive in order for the American people to thrive, because that's through innovation. That's how costs come down, as Paul Atkins said. That's how innovation will make things more efficient and will make everyone wealthier in the long run. So his view of the SEC's role, I think, is exactly right. And he is another home run picked by President Trump. And I think it's going to help our industry thrive a great deal. And it really is a sea change from what we've seen over the last 4 years.
A massive sea change. And I think anti-crypto politicians sense this. They sense that Paul Atkins is a big win for free markets. And because of that, they're trying to do everything they can to sabotage the new SEC. One of the ways they're trying to do that is by renominating Caroline Crenshaw, who as a commissioner at the SEC. For those who don't know, Caroline Crenshaw is one of the most anti-crypto commissioners at the Securities and Exchange Commission. In the words of Brian Armstrong, she's even worse than Gary Gensler himself. So what they've done, though, recently is Sherrod Brown, who notably was defeated in Ohio, in large part because the crypto industry spent a lot of money to defeat him. He tried to push forward the renomination of Caroline Crenshaw and to do it in the current Congress before Republicans take the majority in the next Congress. So he tried to force this vote through. And Senator Haggerty honestly explains it better than anybody. Let's take a look at Senator Haggerty breaking this down for us.
Let me explain what just happened here. I just walked out of a Senate Banking Committee meeting where Chairman Sherrod Brown tried a ruse trick where he brought in two new members of the committee, Schiff and Kim. Just added them in the dark of night last night. They've never met nor vetted the candidates that he brought forward. The candidate that he wanted to jam through, Caroline Crenshaw, the most anti-crypto, anti-markets, pro-ESG candidate they could possibly put forward. There's no way she'd withstand proper vetting. This is a backroom deal that Sherrod Brown, in his last move as chair of the Senate Banking Committee, is trying to jam through. I let my Democrat colleagues know I will have no sympathy on their complaints about our vetting process in the coming Congress.
There you go. So, Brian, do you think that Democrats have learned their lesson when it comes to opposing crypto? Or do you think this is a sign that they're just going to dig their heels in even more?
Well, let's see what happens if they actually end up pushing this through. I think they've put leadership, Schumer and Sherrod Brown have put these two brand new senators in one heck of an awkward spot. They should not support this. This is a really underhanded attempt in a lame duck period after voters. This issue is on the ballot. The freedom to innovate, the freedom to have Bitcoin, the freedom to look at other aspects of the crypto industry and not have overbearing government. This was a real issue in this election, and many Democrats lost because they had the wrong view on this. So to then try to ram this commissioner through in the lame duck, I think is really underhanded. I think one of the reasons they're trying to do it, my understanding at least, in fact, check me on this, but the commissioners have term appointments and Gensler is resigning and so vacating at some point in his term. Atkins, I'm not sure if Atkins would then get a brand new start of the clock, but if it's only then filling out the remainder of Gensler's term, then he has to go through a whole confirmation again in a year or two, whereas the Crenshaw seat, the term is starting anew. And so if they can put Atkins in her seat, then he has the rest of a full term to serve. So it may be a timing game that they're trying to play. At least that's my understanding. Again, I could be wrong. But so in other words, they're trying to do this backroom, dark of night, last second ram through of a nominee in order to limit President Trump's appointees' ability to govern after he just won the election. This is very damaging. Sherrod Brown, I've heard, wants to return to public service someday. So what a way to go out.
Yeah.
To lose an election because of this issue and then to just make a secret underhanded move against the will of the voters who just threw your butt out of office. What are you doing, man? If you actually do want to return to public life, this is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. So really, really bad move by the Democrats. I think if they ultimately get the message and don't follow through with this, that would be a very positive sign that maybe they can wake up and say, hey, we learned something, and that's progress. But if they really do try to go forward with this, then I think they're going to be in the wilderness for longer than we even thought. So I don't know. That's my take on that.
In the wilderness, and deservedly so. They are supposed to be the Democrats, which means you would respect the democratic will of the people, which is clearly that we have an administration that is more friendly towards crypto, more friendly towards free markets. And here Sherrod Brown is trying to more or less subvert the results of that election by jamming through Caroline Crenshaw in the lame duck session. It is, I think, a slap in the face to Americans everywhere who voted for this new administration.
Just to put a finer point on why people are outraged by this. So Bitcoin ETFs, which are very popular, there's tens of billions of dollars of investments in these things because they allow people to have a share of the Bitcoin market without having to get into the nitty gritty of self-custody or whatever it may be. This allows people who want a lower maintenance way of owning Bitcoin. They can call their investment advisor, their broker, what have you, and say, hey, can you put me in the Bitcoin ETF? This was a product that should not have been controversial. The SEC held it up forever until finally they lost a court case, which forced them to approve these ETFs. When that happened, Caroline Crenshaw voted again to deny the ETFs after a court said, you don't have any grounds to deny these. So utterly lawless is how I would describe this nominee. And the fact that Sherrod Brown, after having lost an election on this issue, trying to put a lawless commissioner back in office, is the dumbest political move imaginable, but it's also horrible from a policy standpoint. So I hope this gets stopped in its tracks. Paul Atkins is allowed to have a full term and a full chairmanship and right the ship over there at the SEC.
Fingers crossed on that one. You mentioned as well that this puts those two new senators, Senator Schiff and Senator Kim, in a really awkward position. Let's dig a little bit deeper as to why that is. First, can we pull up the report card from Stand With Crypto for Senator Schiff? So as you can see here, Stand With Crypto gives Senator Schiff an A when it comes to his stances on digital assets. In my opinion, and probably yours as well, Brian, this is, I think they're grading on a curve when it comes to Democrats. You'll see the same thing with Senator Kim as well. He's also given an A for his stances on crypto. Notably, though, if I remember correctly, when he was then Representative Kim, he voted against SAB 121, and Schiff also hasn't had really a perfect record when it comes to crypto issues. It's improved greatly in the past few months when it became very clear that to be against crypto was a huge electoral liability. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Do you think they're deserving of those grades? And beyond that, if they vote against or if they vote for the Crenshaw renomination, is that just a slap in the face to crypto more generally? Do you think it was perhaps even a mistake for organizations like Fairshake to endorse any Democrats at all, if that's how they treat the industry?
I think our interests often align with Fairshake and what they're doing and their support of innovation. I disagree with some of their tactics and some of the specifics. Those grades for those two candidates are absurd. Both of these guys voted against the lowest hanging fruit possible, which was the SAB 121 issue. What that means is it was a rule from Gary Gensler's SEC that prevented financial institutions from custodying their clients' Bitcoin or other digital assets. If somebody wanted to call their banker and say, hey, would you custody my Bitcoin for me? The SEC said, oh, no, you're not allowed to do that because it has to be a liability on your balance sheet, even though it's not the bank's property. They would just be custodying their client's property just the way, their clients wanted them to. It was a ridiculous rule, and everybody knows the whole reason for it was to hurt Bitcoin and crypto industry actors because they didn't like them. It was political maneuvering using a supposedly independent agency, which is absolute nonsense. It was a illegal rule, and Congress voted overwhelmingly to do away with that rule. Now, President Biden ultimately vetoed the resolution, so the rule remained in place, but we expect that to go away very quickly with a new SEC chairman because the rule makes no sense. It was extremely low-hanging fruit. It was an overwhelming vote in Congress to get rid of this. There were 60 votes in the Senate. Senator Schumer voted to get rid of that rule. Mm-hmm. This was not controversial, and both of these guys voted against that resolution. So giving them an A is absurd. You guys messed up. Stop grading on a curve. Stop letting people just give you a few flowery statements and then giving them an A. Watch what they do. So, I think this is their first test. If these guys vote to approve Caroline Crenshaw, they need to go from an A to an F immediately. If they stop it, then okay, then we can remain hopeful about these two senators that they're actually going to be fair and helpful to the industry and helpful to innovation in America. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, these guys have been senators now. They were both sworn in early, not waiting until January because there were, I guess it was unfinished Senate terms. And so the temporary appointed senators who were in there resigned to let them get in a few weeks early so that then they have a little bit more seniority in the Senate compared to the other new members of the Senate. It's helpful for where you land on the committee dais, things like that, how much clout you have in the chamber. So that's why these guys were sworn in a little bit early. But yeah, I think all eyes should be on how they handle this Crenshaw situation.
Because how the Crenshaw situation shakes out will largely determine to what extent we can enact pro-crypto policies at the SEC going forward. So this is usually a consequential vote. Everyone should be paying attention to it. And if you live in California or New Jersey, please call Senator Schiff or Senator Kim's offices and let them know where you stand on the Crenshaw nomination. This is immensely important for the future of digital assets and for the future of freedom more broadly. So pay close attention to this one. And, this just reminded me, if you're liking what you see here today, also remember to like and subscribe to our channel. The more listeners we can get, the more we can get our message out there about the things that we stand for when it comes to Bitcoin and when it comes to building an environment here in the United States where Bitcoin can truly thrive. One of the ways that we're trying to do that as a company is by going on a Bitcoin standard. So a lot of companies, not a lot, actually, it's very few at this point, but the leading companies, I would say, the forward-thinking ones, are considering more seriously this idea of including Bitcoin as a Treasury reserve asset. Of course, the model in doing that was Michael Saylor himself. Michael Saylor is the CEO of MicroStrategy. He took what was sort of a middling tech company during the 2010s, and he launched it into new relevance by going on a Bitcoin standard. MicroStrategy has been absolutely ripping this last year in terms of its stock price because all it does is accumulate more and more Bitcoin, and it finds really creative ways of doing that. So Michael Saylor and our CEO, Jason Les, we know that they're friends. We know that they have conversations often, and they've had conversations about this exact subject, about the idea of buying Bitcoin as opposed to just mining it. And this last week, our company was proud to announce that we would be accumulating $500 million worth of Bitcoin. And as Michael Saylor himself pointed out, Riot is a company on the Bitcoin standard. So this is a really big development in our company. Brian, what do you make of this strategy? The fact that we're not just mining Bitcoin with electricity now, we're also mining Bitcoin with fiat currency.
Yeah, I mean, these notes, extremely low interest, and assuming our thesis is true, which is that Bitcoin is going to continue to rise, this makes all the sense in the world. Bitcoin, Saylor has pointed out that anybody who's held Bitcoin for 4 years or more has made off great on that investment. We think it is just getting started because it really is being held as a reserve asset in many different contexts. Many different finance leaders have compared the investment to a gold-like investment. And if Bitcoin reaches gold parity, then it's going to X or more from where it currently is. And so I think this is excellent. It's a race to hold the most Bitcoin, the number one digital asset of all time. And I think that, I had one thought that was a little concerning. Like, Saylor has been so good at this, and he's acquired so much Bitcoin. I think he's approaching 400,000 Bitcoin, which is 2% of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist. Like, leave some for people.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a people's movement. But, I think the idea is long-term to have the biggest corporate holders of this to potentially be Bitcoin banks or, have all sorts of innovation that derives from being big accumulators of it. I think it's an outstanding investment at this point in time. I understand the thesis of it. Of course, we'll see how it plays out over time, but very proud to be with one of the world leaders in Bitcoin holdings. I think it's MicroStrategy's, Mara, and Riot, I think.
Yeah.
My understanding are the top 3 holders. We even have more Bitcoin than Tesla and Coinbase. So very, very exciting stuff. And, we mine Bitcoin for less, obviously much less than it costs to purchase it. But this is a race to acquire as much as you can because of how well it's been appreciating. So really interesting strategy, makes a lot of sense. And I think it's going to work out very well.
Yeah, I hope it does as well. And, there will come a time when, of course, we have another bear market. And those are usually the times where people dunk on the Michael Saylors of the world. I know he got dunked on majorly in 2022 and 2023, but now he's been vindicated. He took the stock of his company, or the market cap, I should say, from a price of about 1.7 billion in 2020 to about 95 billion today. So that's incredible. He essentially 95x'd his company by investing in Bitcoin, by going on that Bitcoin standard. He's the pioneer in doing this. And like you said, Brian, we're 3rd place as far as the corporate race for Bitcoin holdings go. If you could pull up that bubble chart, Dylan. So this is, I should point out, the rankings are currently correct, but the total holdings in Bitcoin are not. Both MicroStrategy, Mara, and Riot, all 3 of us hold a lot more Bitcoin in terms of its value today. but we are third place. And this is big. If the Bitcoin thesis really does play out, then the riots of the world will be truly powerful countries in the future. Who knows what that time frame might be.
Companies, not countries, but maybe we'll be a country. I don't know.
Get ahead of myself. Yeah, maybe we'll, following the Balaji Srinivasan network state playbook. In all seriousness, maybe some of these companies will integrate into a network state. Who even knows? But the point being that truly companies that are accumulating Bitcoin now, if the thesis plays out like we believe it will be even more powerful, even more influential, and well-resourced in the future. We'll see how that thesis plays out. Interestingly, I think I jumped to countries because I've always got on my mind the strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Yep.
If companies are accumulating Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, then countries should do the same. It's really that simple. This morning, BlackRock came out and they recommended that the portfolio of an average person should have about 2% allocated towards Bitcoin. Interestingly, they also recommend about 2 to 5% should be allocated towards gold. So the logic would hold that if it makes sense for individuals to hold Bitcoin as part of a well-diversified portfolio, why wouldn't nation states do the same? Even more so if Bitcoin can offer itself as an asset that can be used as a tool of economic statecraft. Actually, this last week, I wrote an article in Fortune making the comprehensive case for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And big shout out to Jeff John Roberts at Fortune magazine for accepting this op-ed. I want to point out that getting this op-ed placed was very difficult, in large part because traditional legacy financial publications do not like Bitcoin. I pitched it to, I won't name names, but you could probably fill in the blanks, all the big financial publications out there. I appreciate those who responded, but some just didn't even respond. I'll just name one name, Bloomberg. I pitched them and I got zero response, just crickets. Interestingly enough, 2 days after I pitched them, their editorial board had published their own op-ed, why a strategic Bitcoin reserve is a terrible idea. So that made me realize, okay, there was never any hope of that in the first place. But the case for a strategic Bitcoin reserve needs to be made because whether people who are traditional economists like it or not, there's a really good chance that this becomes policy. And beyond becoming policy, this could be something that's really good for the United States over the long term. Like you said, Brian, everyone who's held Bitcoin for more than 4 years has won up to this point. And Bitcoin as an asset class has been around for 15 years by this point. It's become tested. It's become proven in many ways. In addition to that, there are ways where Bitcoin could strengthen the United States dollar. If people recognize that Bitcoin is appreciating and the United States is the largest nation state holder of Bitcoin, that increases confidence in the U.S. economy, which by extension increases confidence in the U.S. dollar. In addition to that, it can be leveraged as a tool of economic statecraft against some of our adversaries like China and Russia that are currently weaponizing gold as a means of distancing themselves from the U.S. dollar system. A way to undercut that effort is accumulating Bitcoin, which essentially is Netflix to gold's Blockbuster. It's the digital asset that could overtake the physical asset of gold in the same way that Netflix did to Blockbuster. So there's so many good arguments for holding Bitcoin as a reserve asset, whether you're a company, an individual, or even a nation state. Let's hope that these arguments can permeate with the crowds that really are in charge of implementing these policies going forward. Brian, any thoughts on any of that before we go to the grab bag section?
I think you articulated it very well. I would keep an eye on states because, as well as President Trump and what he does when he takes office, he did say he wants to have a strategic Bitcoin stockpile at his speech this summer in Nashville. So we're hopeful that, he follows through on that because we think it's good policy as well as good politics. Bitcoiners will be very excited because they believe in the promise of this asset. So I hope President Trump follows through. We're seeing a number of states potentially creating their own strategic Bitcoin reserves. And there's a bit of a race as well as other countries looking at it. So I want the U.S. to be the leader. I'll be encouraged if states try to race President Trump to do it. I think that's a great idea. And I think we need to be first. And we need to beat other countries and for the reasons that you very well articulated. So really exciting issue. I think probably Bitcoiners and crypto people pay more attention to this than the G-pop, the general population. But it's a very important issue and could unleash and help America really become a much stronger country in the future. So hopefully this happens.
One of the core principles of Bitcoin is transparency. This idea that we should see how the monetary system we're opting into with Bitcoin works. We should be able to read the code. We should be able to understand without any confusion or doubt whatsoever how Bitcoin works as a monetary asset in a way that we don't have with the US dollar. The Federal Reserve can print who knows how much money over the next few years. We don't know. These are all decisions that are made by a select group of individuals in rooms that the public aren't privy to. So transparency is core to the Bitcoin philosophy. And it's in keeping with what the Trump administration is trying to do in Washington. They're trying to push forward greater transparency. And Brian, I know that you had a clip here that you wanted to play that speaks to that transparency that Trump is fighting for.
Yeah, let's take a look at that clip, Dylan, if you got it.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah.
Would you,
I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would. Attorney General.
Yeah, I would love it. I think, okay, so let's start with a few of those, and then I want to go to what is a topic of conversation these days, which is drones flying over parts of the United States. But Saudi Arabia, I suspect, based on everything that we've seen so far, that it could be controversial, especially with respect to Saudi Arabia, which is a difficult subject since they are an ally. We are trying to work with them to eradicate terrorism in the Middle East. That is complicated, but I think transparency is needed. And now it's 23, almost 24 years later. I think it's time. The JFK files, I don't know what we're going to learn there. The mob involved? Did it have something to do with Vietnam? Did it have something to do with a kind of global communist network? Perhaps the Cubans? I don't know what we're gonna learn that we haven't already learned, but I will be, with my popcorn waiting to see. The Epstein list. Oh boy, we could have. There could be a lot of fallout there from that list. I don't know what we're going to see on that one. But again, my popcorn is going to be out. I think just one plug for a broader culture of declassification and less secrecy in government and more transparency. We really do. There is way too much classification. The way it currently works, all the employees with any ability to create or edit or look at classified documents are incentivized to classify everything because they don't want to slip up and miss something that they should have classified. So it's this kind of default attitude of just classify everything. And that creates a government that is not transparent or accountable. And I think that's really the main issue here. But I also want him to declassify information about UAPs and UFOs and aliens. And let's see what we got. Today in the news is a story about drones. Dozens and dozens of drones flying over New Jersey. They're apparently flying over southern Maryland and other areas. The disturbing part to me is that they've been seen flying over some critical infrastructure like reservoirs, power stations, things that could have if used for nefarious purposes, these could have really deleterious effects for the U.S. If you've seen the Obama movie, Leave the World Behind, where our critical infrastructure was impacted. Basically, they electronically started downing planes and steering ships off course and stuff like that.
Whoa.
That's the type of catastrophic effects that I view. If some foreign adversary, some bad actor is able to affect our electricity and our water and our food supply and things like that. So I don't know what the drones are, but we should be pretty worried about it. And the fact that the government is we don't know. It's not us. We don't think it's another country, but I don't know. We don't know. That's not a very good answer.
Yeah.
We got to figure this out.
These are car-sized drones too.
Yeah. The size of pickup trucks and small school buses.
Yeah. They're not small. And like you said, them being over critical infrastructure is incredibly concerning. One of your friends and someone I follow on Twitter, Josh Steinman, he often tweets how many foreign agents are on American soil right now. Essentially, how many saboteurs are well positioned at any given moment to attack our critical infrastructure, be it reservoirs, be it our power grid, be it our oil supply. This is incredibly concerning stuff. And it also has shades of the Chinese weather balloon a couple of years back, where the government was anything but forthcoming about what the Chinese weather balloon was. And it's the same playbook all over again with the drones. And getting back to that point of transparency, I just don't know what the national security reason would be to not reveal to the American people what these are if it is potentially a foreign adversary who's launching these drones in New Jersey. And I think there are reports now in Maryland of similar drones being seen in the skies. We need greater transparency. We need to recognize that our enemies will attack us in any way they can, starting with our critical infrastructure. So let's hope we can get to the bottom of this soon. I don't know why they just don't shoot them out of the air, personally. Yeah. What's to stop us from doing that? So, and maybe if the government does it, maybe an enterprising farmer will. So we can only wait and see what will happen. But yeah, Brian, we covered a lot of territory today, from the Bitcoin Dream Team to the Caroline Crenshaw Nightmare nomination to drones in the skies of New Jersey. Anything else we should touch on before we close?
We have covered a lot of ground, but it is a new day in America. Very exciting for Bitcoin and for markets and for freedom. And so a lot of optimism here at the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. Remember to follow us on Twitter at MorganSternNJ, at Sam Lyman33. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on the Policy Pod. Thanks.